My name is Whitney Smith. I am a consultant and I work with the Infosys Foundation USA. I've worked with them for about 3 years, and welcome. Thank you for coming to this session. I'm going to be just doing a brief introduction of our moderator and our panelists, and then I'll be turning it over to them. There is a Q&A portion, and so if you are asking questions, I will have the mic and I will run it to you so that you show up on video. Otherwise, if you're not talking into the mic, we won't hear you on the video. Okay? All right, so our session is looking at how do we meet the needs of preparing new teachers to teach CS in the classroom. And so our moderator today is Dr. Mark Nelson. He is with CSTA, the Computer Science Teachers Association, and as the executive director, he leads that dynamic professional organization with more than 24,000 global members, and he is committed to empowering and advocating for K-12 CS teacher education across our country. Next to him is the lovely Ann Leftwich. Ann is with Indiana University in Bloomington and is an associate professor of instructional systems technology. Her expertise lies in design of digital curriculum resources, the use of tech to support pre-service teacher training, and development and implementation of professional development for teachers and teacher educators. To her right is Aman Yadav. He's at Michigan State University and is an associate professor in the College of Education and is the director of the MA program in the Educational Technology program at Michigan State. In addition to being a doctor in educational psychology and educational technology, he holds a BA and a master's in electrical engineering. He's very busy. It's a lot of school. Last but not least is Cullen White, who's with Teach for America. He is the lead instructor and program coordinator of the IT Academy at Fairmount Heights High School, located in Prince George County, Maryland, and he currently teaches CS and Cisco Networking Academy courses. He entered teaching as a Teach for America core member. You're not that anymore. This is an old bio. I'm like reading this and I'm like, that's not who Cullen is. That's like 5 years ago. Okay, so Cullen, will you tell us your title? Microphone. Sorry about that. I was like, this is not who he is.
Totally all right? I'm the managing director for computer science education at Teach for America. I've been in this role for about 2 years now. That was my past life, though. I now live in Seattle, Washington. After about 7 years teaching in Prince George's County, Maryland, I got started as a Spanish and social studies teacher before transitioning into teaching computer science. Entirely self-taught, for better or for worse. But I have an extreme love for computer science education and what it does for our students. So
awesome, thank you.
Me in a nutshell.
And most of you probably know what Teach for America is, but it is looking at putting teachers into communities around our country, and you have a new focus on CS education over the last couple years, and how do you put that into the work of Teach for America? Okay. Dr. Mark, take it away.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for attending this morning. Lots of times when we talk about computer science education, we're often looking at retraining current teachers, and a lot of PD focused on current teachers. But there is that question of that future pipeline and where that future pipeline comes from. So I'm kind of excited to have this particular group on this panel this morning to address this topic. I thought probably the place for us to start was for each of you to kind of introduce yourselves, things you're doing in your organization, particularly around what you're doing around pre-service education. So I guess we can start with Ann and work down.
Okay, so my name's Ann Leftwich. I'm an associate professor within the School of Education at Indiana University. And what I do is I supervise and teach our technology integration course that all pre-service teachers have to take. And so we have about 200 to 250 students each semester that take that particular course. So this can be elementary, secondary, and all subjects, as well as those that have a P through 12 license in art or health education. Within that course, we do a little bit with like Web 2.0 tools, technology integration, digital citizenship, and then a large portion of that is also directed towards computational thinking in K-12, computer science, hour of code, those type of things as well. So that's in that one particular course, and then I also teach and supervise our computer education licensure program, which is an add-on licensure for anybody that has an initial licensure degree. So For those pre-service teachers that are pursuing elementary education, if they add on this license, technically they can teach computer science P through 12. If they are doing secondary social studies or something along those lines, they can add on this license and again have more options to teach. Within that licensure program, we have, in addition to the one required technology integration course that everybody has to take, there are 4 additional courses that they have to take. Should I go through the courses? Do you think that would be interesting? Really briefly? Okay. So within those 4 courses, we have a field experience associated with each one of those. The first course is goes over HTML, CSS, robotics, and algorithms. And then they have a large field experience where they do a follow-up on the hour of code in a local elementary school. Then the next course in the sequence is a methods course, and in that course we look at how to do technology integration, professional development, computer applications, and also computer science. So looking at like best practices for those, and also talking about how do we teach these concepts. And then they have a field experience with each one of those main 4 silos, as well as like a weekly field experience, depending on if they're elementary or secondary. We place them in those particular buildings. Then they have a computer science course, which looks at a very brief introduction on Scratch to introduce them to big, broader concepts. And then they focus the rest of that class on Python. And then the last course in the sequence is looking at hardware, software, networking, and things that they would need to know in order to be a technology director. And so it might sound like a hodgepodge of different things. The reason why we have addressing all these different capacities is because within the state of Indiana, we have many rural districts that would probably be pretty similar to most other states. And so we need to be able to prepare our students to be able to address lots of issues in one particular district, as well as that's what the current Pearson test covers for their licensure. They have to take that. And the last thing in it that I forgot to mention is they also do an additional 6 weeks of student teaching just in computer education.
So similar to Ann, Michigan is also has a lot of rural schools. So most of my work is focused around embedding computational thinking into the existing curricula for pre-service teachers, because a lot of schools are not able to afford a computer science teacher by themselves. So a computer science teacher should also be able to teach math, science. Sometimes they're also the heat and cooling guy in a rural school, managing a computer lab, networking, so many hats. So most of my work at Michigan State is focused on working in our Intro to Ed Tech course, like Ann, to bring computational thinking in to the course. Majority of our teachers, pre-service teachers in that course are elementary teachers, because secondary pre-service teachers don't have enough room in their curriculum to take Intro to Ed Tech course. So all our elementary ed teachers take that course. We get about 5% secondary teachers. And also I'm working with our math and science education faculty who teach the methods courses. So methods courses are courses that pre-service teachers take before they go out into their field experience. So bringing in computational thinking into math and science, and preparing pre-service teachers to think computationally, so they can then bring CT into their courses so their students can think computationally. When I was a faculty member at Purdue, and there we developed a supplemental licensure program from 2010 to 2014. It was a project called CS4EDU, where pre-service teachers could, in addition to their primary licensure area, which was math and science, as a pre-service teachers that we were able to attract into the program, but they take an additional 5 courses in computer science, as well as a computer science methods course, to teach computer science. But the challenge for a supplemental licensure program is that math and science teachers don't have trouble finding jobs, and why would they stay another 6 months to get a supplemental licensure program in CS and pay that money when they don't have trouble finding jobs? And we're getting more and more pushback in Michigan from school districts because of the need for math and science teachers, that they don't want those teachers to teach computer science because they have need for math and science, right? So why are they going to teach computer science when they can barely fill computer science or math and science positions?
Lots of interesting questions. So building off of what Whitney had said earlier, for those of you who aren't familiar with Teach for America, we place new teachers in 53 different communities across the United States. So we are a national organization about as at scale as one can possibly be. And so we started our computer science initiative about 2 years ago with a flagship program called the Exploring Computer Science Fellowship. So we work with the Exploring Computer Science team, and we recruit current teachers who are already in our network. So we call them core members, and then we have alumni, but I'm just going to call them teachers because that's what they are, right? We recruit current teachers to make an additional 2-year commitment to our program in teaching computer science. So all subject areas, doesn't matter. At the high school level, we recruit teachers from 13 different jurisdictions right now to start teaching the Exploring Computer Science course. And in most instances, this is the first time that the high schools that they teach in will have had any access to a computer science course. So they are it for their communities in a lot of instances. And over the next 2 years, we're going to take all of the things that we've learned from this project. Ultimately, we'll recruit about 180 teachers teaching ECS, and we'll go ahead and fold all of this learning and knowledge into a full spectrum pre-service suite, training all of our teachers pre-K through 12 in all subject areas in some form of computer science, hopefully preparing full-time computer science teachers at the end of the road. And so we're really, really excited about doing that, excited to share some of the learnings that we've had and will have over the next couple of years. What's that? Tweet it. Wendy Kopp might get mad. We'll see. She's our founder. No, it's fine. Go for it. Tweet it.
So you brought up this interesting point, Aman, and I'd like to build on it a little bit. So we have a little bit of this question around recruitment, like where future teachers are coming from, particularly future computer science teachers. And since in many states, computer science counts as either a math or science course, most CS teachers are coming from math or science, but there's increasingly a pushback with states, or there seems to be a disincentive so teachers can easily get a job as a math or science. Why go that extra step? What are your different organizations doing, or what do you see as the future of kind of how do we recruit CS teachers if that's the way the course counts?
So over the last decade or so NEA, National Education Association, I saw a report that in 2004, 11% of incoming freshmen wanted to be teachers. In 2014, 4% of incoming freshmen want to be teachers, right? So we've really vilified teachers, and the current policy at the federal as well as a lot of state level. Our enrollment's down anywhere from 30 to 40%, right? We think it's hit the bottom and it's gonna upswing. So it's hard to convince teacher education programs that they should develop a CS licensure program when the math and science and your traditional subject areas are barely meeting their need for enrollment numbers. So it is a challenge. I'm not sure we have an easy answer besides that we need to start working at the policy level of how we represent teaching in general.
And so, interestingly enough, we currently don't have a recruitment problem for the CS part, like definitely for the teachers, right? I think that's something that we can all say that we're facing, just the decrease in teachers. And I think a pretty evident rationale would be the fact that how teachers have been treated. I know many teachers that have said, I've told my own child who's about to go into it that thought they might want to go into teaching to not go into it because of what they're facing. However, for those that do pursue teaching, one of the unique things that we've had at Indiana University, especially for our elementary students, is that they have to have a minor in something, and the computer education licensure program is a minor area. So they figure, why don't I go and do that? That would be fantastic, and I can add that in. The other real gem that we've had is that the technology integration course is required by everyone, and there are many students that seem to just really enjoy that class in general. They actually enjoy it. They haven't been afforded the opportunity to see like what are the possibilities, what are some amazing things that are happening, because depending on their institution, they may not have, where they went to high school and K-12, they may not have had exposure to technology and computer science. So that's been something that we've really been able to capitalize on, as well as the fact of word of mouth. So with our pre-service teachers, because we have so many field experience opportunities, that's something that those pre-service teachers really crave. They want to be in the classrooms, they want to be working with students, and they've been able to start crafting their pedagogical skills and strategies through our program, because our program is actually before their other methods courses. So through those different types of opportunities, I think that's been one way for our recruitment. So we have a class size of anywhere between 15 to 20 pre-service teachers going through each year.
So I think that this is a place where non-traditional alternative route certification programs can really step in, so Teach for America being one of many options. I would really love to sort of turn the table on industry and start poaching teachers. Yeah, I want to start poaching teachers from industry, right? Like there's no reason why we can't recruit from Google, from Microsoft to get folks to come into the classroom with a focus on computer science. I think also too with Teach for America, when we recruit teachers from their undergraduate majors, I'll talk with a lot of different computer science graduates who are really interested in teaching, but they ultimately make the call to go into industry because they can't teach a full course load of computer science. And I think if we can address some of the demand side issues with our school districts, where we can create, whether it's with just traditional full-time positions at different schools or districts, or whether we're creating a full-time position across multiple districts in a geographical area, finding ways to go ahead and make sure that we get full-time opportunities for folks, I think that we're going to go ahead and get folks with computer science skills into the classroom. And so, yeah, did you want to?
No, I completely agree about the need for full-time positions, right? Because, but it's easy to do in a larger school districts, right? So TFA works in large school districts, but in Michigan, a lot of school districts are rural, as I said, right? So they can't afford a computer science teacher by themselves, right? So maybe a local geographical area who could have one computer science teacher that could go hop from school to school and pay for their mileage, because teachers, don't make enough, and we can't expect them to drive, 60 miles every day to teach classes. Might be one route to go.
I totally agree with you. And so we do work in urban areas, but we're also in really small rural areas. And so a couple examples of those are like the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, the Four Corners area in New Mexico. We're also in rural Washington State. There we're actually going to be working with ESD 105, which is a consortium of smaller school districts, to go ahead and try to address these issues to build out these smaller solutions. And so if anybody here is interested in helping us with that type of a project, we've got to figure it out. I think that we have a responsibility in doing that. And I know that teachers are overworked. I know that principals are overworked. But somewhere along the line, we've got to go ahead and come together and figure out really unique solutions that are responsive to the needs of our communities and that solve this problem. Otherwise, we're going to end up with an even bigger achievement gap than we had in the first place. And that is nothing but problematic for our country and for our communities. So.
And I think that's the interesting challenge that we have with CS education, is that up to this point, many of our K-12 students have had no exposure to computer science content, right? So trying to take anybody that is, without having somebody from industry or somebody with the content to bring them in, that's a big leap, that's a big ask, and we also want to make sure that we're maintaining quality for our students as well, right?
Yeah, so. Absolutely.
All right, so why don't we turn it now to the floor? Are there any questions people have for our panelists? There is a mic. We'll ask you to speak in the mic to make sure it gets recorded onto the video.
Hey, I really like this panel coming together, right, to talk about teacher recruitment, because this has been like the unanswered questions that we've had all along. So one of you, Cullen, I think you mentioned perhaps considering recruiting teachers from industry, right? And I know there's no solution right now at this point, but I do know some teachers, CSP teachers, that have come from industry. and are wonderful. I mean, they're in the classroom, but it's because, and this is my perspective, it's because they got connected with the right support team. They're connected with, a professor at the University of Alabama who's supporting them like in and out of the classroom, right? So what are your thoughts about that? If we could, and if there are folks in industry that are truly interested in coming into teaching computer science, which I think, could work, what do we do to cultivate them and, with sustainability in mind, with that kind of recruitment?
So,
Do you mind if I just start real fast? So our Exploring Computer Science Fellowship that I mentioned earlier is helping us build a community of teachers that we can learn from and that we can continually really dig in deep with to address some of those issues. What do teachers actually need? And then I look out here in this audience and these brilliant people that I'm sharing a stage with right now, and I think that we have a lot of answers here within the community. And so we all have a responsibility to learn from each other and figure out what that sustainable community of support is going to look like in actions and in words and all these other things, so that we can figure out how to create something that works really well at pre-service, and then build off of it so that conversations, really meaningful ones, are continuing long after people leave their pre-service community and they go in to teach wherever they teach in the United States or abroad, whatever happens.
I think one of the things that just in general teachers struggle with, especially beginning teachers, is they really struggle those first few years. It doesn't matter if you're from Teach for America or from a regular, a 4-year type of program. Those first few years can be completely overwhelming, regardless of whatever preparation you've had. So figuring out a way that we can better mentor and support those students, I think that comes to really it needs to be a research practice partnership of some sorts between the universities and the school districts to figure out how do we support them, what do we do, and some of the things that we know will work would be video cases, right? So those amazing teachers that you have that can teach computer science that you've seen, they're just phenomenal, videotaping them so that other teachers can say, okay, this is how you would approach this is how you might answer these particular questions, but then also having some kind of at the very least, some kind of virtual support network, or the virtual lounge that we were talking about before, where they can come together and talk about this is what worked for me, this is what didn't work for me.
So I'm looking at some data right now, teachers' background and teaching experience, number of teaching experience, as well as their content background. So whether they came from industry or they came from just teaching background. And those support mechanisms, especially in their pedagogical approaches, I'm looking at that data, is a significant predictor of how confident they feel in terms of teaching CS in the classroom. So supporting teachers through the CS 10K, or it's not called csforallteachers.org, right, would be valuable for those beginning teachers.
I have a question. So it's 2 questions, but they're related. So what suggestions do you have for states like California that don't yet have, the state doesn't have its act together in terms of credentialing and license? They're still sort of deliberating. They've just started a standards effort. And so how should pre-service programs, which are so driven by credentialing, approach this issue of bringing in CS? And the other question, sort of related, is have you used math and science as entry points, or other subjects, to bring in computational thinking and bring in those ideas of CS? I think you all touched upon it, but a little more on how math and science ed could change to bring in CT and CS.
So you could go the Michigan route and just get rid of any teacher certification in computer science, which is the way Michigan seems to be heading, and mainly to address the problem that CS certification, they don't have enough numbers to make it sustain. So they said, we're gonna just get rid of it. So if you are a teacher and you have any licensure area, you can teach computer science, right? But what's happening is primarily math and science teachers in larger school districts are the one, mainly partnership with code.org, are going to teach computer science next year. And I think Pat is here, 75 teachers in Michigan are going through the code.org training this year. They're in-service teachers, right? So that's what they're getting. But the implications for that at the pre-service teacher level is we don't have a CS certification program anymore, right? We've only had 3 or 4 students that go through that program once a year. Again, it's because of the challenge of it's a supplemental licensure program, right? So they have to spend an extra 6 months in the semester. And our teacher prep program is 5 years. 4 years of coursework and 1 year of internship. So ask them to stay for another 6 months is not feasible. So what I've been trying to do, as I said earlier, is working with our math and science faculty, math and science education faculty, to bring in computational thinking into the methods courses. So they learn about CT in the Intro to Ed Tech course, which becomes a core. So they learn about algorithms, abstraction, automation, some coding. And then when they go to the methods course during their senior year, they get to apply those ideas more within the context of their subject areas. So when they take a math methods course, they talk about modeling, for example. When they take math methods course, they talk about abstraction, right? But it is a challenge. It's a challenge because we have 10 sections of a science or math methods course, right? So faculty that I'm working with this year might not be teaching it 2 years down the road, and there are no new TAs, right? So how do we make it sustainable so it becomes embedded and gets a buy-in from the teacher preparation program, you know? So in 2 years, hopefully we'll have that figured out.
Oh, well, so I think one of the things we don't have just math and science, we have all different subject areas. So I would say about half of the people that are enrolled in our computer education licensure program are elementary education. And then the other half are secondary, and just in the last class that I had one secondary German, one secondary math, 2 secondary English language arts, and 2 secondary social studies. So they're coming from all different backgrounds, right? And I think that this would be the same thing that Code.org and the CSP, I went to one of their boot camps, and I was placed in a group of teachers, one Chinese teacher, one social studies teacher, someone that had taught computer science. So it's a realm of different subject areas. And I think the interesting challenge that we have, let's call it a unique opportunity, is to figure out how do we address all of these different areas that people will struggle with, right? So regardless of whether or not you're coming from industry or different areas, there are certain things that you need to know, right? You need to have the computer science content, and that's going to vary for different people. Like for the math and science people, that's going to be a little bit easier to pick up. For my elementary education folks, that's been more of a struggle for them. But they take the same course, they get this, similar types of support, but we have to figure out how can we support those individuals differently? What does that need to look like in order to help them with that particular content? It might be the issue of like microcredentialing, how we include that in pre-service education. That might even be a new, exciting way to get into that is if we only have the intro to ed tech courses and we can't figure out how to do these types of things, believe it or not, elementary education majors love to have additional stamps on, their certificate to say, like, this is why I should be hired. Look at all of the different things that I can do. I can do hour of code. I can do, I have a stamp in algorithms from Michigan State or from CSTA. Like, that can be another example for us to say, like, this is what we're trying to get into. This is what we're trying to do. So that's one of the things that we're starting to do with our Intro to Ed Tech course is we're starting to do badging or micro-credentialing in order to try and address that to get at the different areas or the different things, whether it's general pedagogical support that you might need if you're coming in with industry, or whether it's like computer science specific methods that you would need if you were coming in for an add-on type of licensure.
I would just say, just going off of that though, with Teach for America, everything that we do across our pre-service suite is going to start with integration. And I think it's really important to be light touch too, as to not overwhelm teachers. There's so many competing priorities, and there's no way in hell that you're ever going to get me to drop literacy for computer science. I love CS education, but literacy is so exceptionally important. And so we'll continue to figure out how to wade into those waters and then continue to work with the community to figure out what feels right for our teachers and for our communities that we serve.
Well, and actually, as Ann mentioned, this is one of those areas where CSGA is starting to engage a bit more, and particularly around micro-credentialing. And it's partly in recognition that, as we've talked with our members, I think both the new teachers and the new to CS teachers, even some of the more established CS teachers, and many of them do come from different pathways. We have very little data, very little research, very little knowledge around. So what helps different teachers become more successful CS teachers? So what someone coming from a music background needs is maybe different from what someone from a math background needs. And so how do we figure out what's the right PD pathway for them to become more successful? At the same time, I think there's also this question around microcredentialing in terms of can we provide clear pathways? So some teachers only want to be able to integrate a little bit more CS into what they're doing. Others want to become full CS teachers. I mean, I think one of the big things for us, and in fact this came out at NC WIT just a day or two ago again, where there was a teacher who wasn't going to come to the CSTA conference this summer because she thought, well, that's just for CS teachers. And when you look at our membership, I mean, most of our members are actually teachers who teach CS, not just CS teachers. Many don't identify as CS teachers. I mean, there's probably only about 5 to 7% of our members who actually have any formal CS background. The large bulk of them come from other areas. Probably about a third of them are math, a quarter of them are science, 20% are CTE, and the rest are all across the spectrum. Chinese, Spanish, history, shop, physical education, music, art, you name it. If they're teaching it in K-12, they probably are a member of ours in one way or another. And so, being able to, when we look at microcredentialing and what we're doing in that space, it's this idea of being able to help a teacher get to whatever level they would like to in terms of being able to introduce and do it with both competence and confidence. And I think that's really at the heart of what we think about in terms of microcredentialing. So we are actually talking with a number of states about, can those pathways then become alternative pathways to certification and things like that, particularly for those states which might be struggling with trying to define what that might look like currently within their environments.
Mark, you scarily, just literally said the same thing that I was about to ask. So I'm going to, check later if there's, some sort of mind reader that he's got implanted here. But I was going to ask that question about identity. And one of the things that I've learned, I'm the PI for the CS for All Teachers virtual community. One of the things I quickly figured out is that there is a very big distinction between computer science teachers and teachers who teach CS. And we get all of them across the spectrum. And so then when I think about, my background was as a third grade teacher, so I put myself in that position of an elementary teacher, and now, as Cullen said, you're now asking me to teach CS on top of all these other things. It's exasperated by I may be a new teacher, and I'm trying to figure that out. So you had some ideas, but I'm wondering if others, literally you took the words, how do we help to increase their confidence as well as their competence? Because I think that, the more confident they are and they feel like they see that they can do this, the more they'll also be able to be a leader and help advocate for integrating more with CS and computational thinking.
We're having some fun, right? I think that oftentimes we forget as educators to take some of the same strategies with our adults and our friends and our peers as we do with our students. We have to meet people where they are. If we want to see more English or ELA teachers start teaching computer science, then we have to figure out how to integrate computational thinking into ELA in really meaningful ways. Same thing with social studies. I think that that's a huge missed opportunity for us all the way from elementary through high school. We have to start talking about the history of computer science and how we can embed that when we're talking about modern history, right, in really meaningful ways. I was at a great conversation the other day about role models and mentors, right? And so being able to give people, kids and teachers, folks that they can look up to or that they can idolize, it's really important to do that. They've got to be able to see themselves as folks who are computer science teachers or teachers who teach CS. Yeah.
So I've actually done a longitudinal study that followed 4 of our pre-service teachers from the computer education licensure program past the first 2 years that they were teaching. And one of the things that is most surprising is that once they got, even when they were doing their student teaching, they were surprised at how much more well prepared they were than they thought they were going to be. So the field experiences, interacting with other teachers, that piece really helped that part of it. And the other thing that we've found to be successful too is with our pre-service teachers, especially in that introduction to educational technology course, is really convincing them of the importance of computer science in general. Like, guess what? So we showed the CS is changing everything. Thank you. code.org. That one's an awesome video. So we show that video, and so we start showing them, like, even if you're in a rural area, thinking about different ways that technology can impact your students. This is going to impact them. So you need to prepare them whether or not you're, ready to do that. So starting to think about it that way.
So the approach that I've taken is really focusing on the unplugged ways to embed computational thinking into their courses or future courses. So building off of what Cullen was saying, meeting teachers where they're at. So I was having a conversation with a teacher, like algorithms. They're like, oh, that's math. I don't do algorithms, right? I teach English as a second language. So just in the conversation, talking about the kinds of assignments she uses in her lesson plans. Oh, having students go home and talk to their parents, take a recipe and convert and write that in English. Recipe, algorithms, right? So connecting to where teachers are at before jumping in the coding aspect of it, right? And I think for me, that's helped them see connections to what they already do, they might do in their classroom, and then bringing in the automation part has worked well.
If I can add one other piece on that identity as well. Just years ago, I was a faculty member at an engineering institution, and I taught in a business school. And I was at a meeting once, and a faculty member from one of those schools was shocked to learn that in schools of business, there's actually more than one discipline. They thought there was only one discipline within a school of business. And I think we actually have that same problem which goes on within computer science right now. And so particularly, again, as we talk about teachers and their identities, just like in science, we have earth science and biology and chemistry and physics. We are starting to see these different segments and pathways and identities amongst our members. And so as we're thinking about, again, microcredentialing and pathways, it again thinks about how do we help them grow on that path in whichever pathway they identify themselves with. So for example, we see teachers who are interested in robotics. That's their pathway. So how do we help them become better at robotics and boost their confidence and also broaden their CS knowledge within that domain? Or, we also see data science and artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, elementary ed and kind of computational thinking. Game design, there's a number of these really interesting domains and groups which are forming within the K-12 CS community. And so as we think about the PD pathways and how we build competence and confidence, it's partly figuring out, so what is that thing which sparks them? What is that interest for them? What's getting them? And that may be culturally relevant to a particular school or a particular region. It may be based on what kind of industries are within that area, or it could be just on what got that teacher interested in teaching CS. And so I think that's part of how we have to identify those parts of the identity as much as other aspects, because I think that has a big impact on where it goes, and it actually helps make CS more sustainable, I think, over the long term, because it begins to recognize that CS, like science, is a very, very broad, diverse discipline.
So, do we have a sense of what K-5 or K-8 computer science teachers have to know about computer science? Because I feel like if we're really, I'm very committed to this idea of pre-service, plus this new TFA CS core I'm super excited about, just saying. Cullen tweeted it. Yeah. But I feel like what we're doing is we're like sometimes in some very progressive places we're cross-listing intro to CS for non-majors in the School of Ed and CS. Like that's a huge shot over the bow. But or having teachers take CSP but the truth is we have a defined scope of like ELA for K-5 teachers. We don't make someone who's going to teach first grade, they don't have to teach calculus in order to teach. Like, have we defined this, and is somebody working on this? Because I feel like this is a piece of what we need.
No,
or do you disagree?
No, I completely agree that I think we do need to define what knowledge teachers need, not just K through 5, K through 8, but also the high school level, right? To teach computing. I don't think we have an answer yet. So the work that does exist right now from the Technical University of Munich on measuring teachers' knowledge is based on programming, right? And Java specifically, right? So it's not a general that you could just take and adapt and apply to K through 5. So I don't think we know yet what knowledge teachers need. to teach. Kind of like math knowledge to teach. We know knowledge that teachers need to teach mathematics, right? There's decades of work on that. We don't have that, and I'm hoping that the K-12 framework could help inform or jumpstart that work about, okay, here's what we know what students need to learn. How do we translate this for teachers next?
Just in terms of like what we know about science and math too, I think the things that are going to be really important are going to be understanding the misconceptions that are identified in the particular framework. Like what misconceptions might students have about this, and how do we really differentiate between that? What are some good ways to approach that from a teaching standpoint?
Talking about the CSTA standards too, that's something that we should clearly be mindful of as well, and then as states develop their own sets of standards too. I also think that we'd be remiss if we didn't take all of that knowledge that we've been developing and start looking at other subject areas to figuring out where does CS already live. My wife is an early childhood educator, and I've been privy to a lot of different videos and seeing a lot of great exemplary teaching practices that have come through in early childhood education. I'm like, wow, that looks a lot like good computer science teaching. Did you know that you've been teaching computer science for the last 5 years? And the answer is always no, right? And I think that if we could take a look at what's happening in classrooms across America in different subject areas and figure out what CS is already there, we're probably going to be able to extrapolate a lot of really great information that's going to inform these longitudinal studies that we ultimately are either performing now or will perform in the future.
I have one here and then
So this is a lot of mind reading as well, Cullen. Just you stole my thought, because I was just in response to what she just said.
Installed something over all the
Yeah.
chairs.
So
Yeah.
in my daughter's school, my daughter is finishing up first grade, and there's a student teacher in her class, one of our students, one of our ed students who is a student teacher, and talking to her, I mean, this is completely anecdotal, but talking to her, that seems like a good way of sort of working back into pre-service programs, of saying, you're putting teachers into classrooms for student teaching. They're probably preparing to be an early childhood teacher or a math teacher or whatever else, but this ambient learning of what kind of computer science goes on in those classrooms could be a good way of both enticing teachers to then become computer science teachers, as well as trying to define for this K-5 community, what does a teacher have to know? What kind of background do they need, right? So that's I'm just echoing now.
Right. So in my local district, so I know the superintendent, and he thought that they only had about 3 teachers teaching computer science, mostly at the high school level, across the district. And but we got into a conversation. He said, well, okay, we'll hold a meeting, and we'll ask the people across the district if they were teaching computer science. We kind of defined it a little bit for them. We had about 60 teachers show up from across the district, and they were all doing things which really were computer science at all different levels. And the superintendent was kind of blown away and said, oh, wow, we really have to start thinking about what we're really doing, and maybe put some coherence around computer science, because he just thought they were doing the 3 classes or so at the high school level. And I think that probably does happen in many schools, that there probably is computer science going on in some form or another, whether it's in an after school or it's in a club or it's happening in the library, or it's happening in different classrooms by different teachers who are just experimenting. And so, there are things to think about that how do we then pull that in? Because many teachers may be doing it not even realizing they're doing it.
So a lot of similar things are happening in methods courses, right? So talking to my math and science methods courses faculty, like they talk about tanagrams as a problem decomposition, bringing that in, but they don't use that language in the methods course, right? So it's also things that are already happening. How do we bring in those computation concepts and connecting those, so as pre-service teachers go through in the classrooms, they can bring that to their future classrooms as well.
Just a small anecdote on that. I was in a meeting with some of my colleagues the other week because I'm trying to help them wrap their heads around what computer science looks like. And another ECE example, I was like, we're using the words abstraction and algorithms very loosely, and I could tell that my colleagues were very lost. Lynn Diaz was actually there with me. And so I stopped and I paused and I said, does everybody know what that means? And they were like, yeah. I was like, no, you don't. Okay, so like that's fine. Like let's all admit it. Let's call a spade a spade. And we talked about the example of teaching a kid to brush their teeth in an early childhood classroom. If you say brush your teeth, that is the biggest case of abstraction that you could possibly give to like a 3-year-old child, right? And so being able to break that down so that early childhood teachers, as an example, understand that they actually are teaching algorithms to kids when they do something like washing their hands or brushing their teeth or getting in line, is a really meaningful thing. And I think using their language is also key, because we forget that they're humans and that they may not use these terms regularly the way that we do. And I think showing them and demonstrating that kind of respect goes a really, really long way. So yeah. Yeah, and I've never seen a fire start faster on my team. And I was like, I was just talking about brushing your teeth. Like, what's the big deal? Yeah, so it's something for all of us to keep in mind as we go around and have these conversations, because I think that what we do extends even further than we already know that it does, right?
So y'all were talking about what should all teachers know in computer science, right? So the thing is that, and there's much research and that needs to happen and to figure that out. But the funny thing is that that's already being figured out right now. So Aman and I sit on the National Advisory Committee for the ETS praxis exam. So ETS is creating a national praxis for computer science. So is Pearson, and they're creating a national, so they're revising, both of them have been contracted to create state-based CS exams before, but this is the first time that they're creating national CS exams. And so as part of that, they're obviously creating a content domain. And they released one out to the public a couple months ago. So regardless of what studies show, these groups of people are creating something to start off with. And what that's going to do is that's going to inform what teacher prep programs are going to teach their teachers. So, Anne is going to have to change. It's not teaching to the test, but she is going to, part of it is preparing her teachers to pass that test. So once that comes out, that is going to be the definition, regardless of what research says. So I'm mentioning this because folks need to be aware of this. They haven't released them yet, obviously. They're still in development mode. You all need to get involved. And so when the reviews come out, please take the time to review it.
When is that going to be?
Diane, what would you say?
She wants to know when.
The early review came out. It was like in February, but then the next one will come out, I think, in the summer sometime.
And so
Yeah.
we should convene
Yeah.
community review.
Yes. Community review, provide input, all that kind of stuff,
Great.
because that's happening right now.
Great.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Krishna. I'm from a company called Tinker. So I'll give you some background for my questions. So I have 2 kids. One is in 10 years old and 13. I asked them, what do you do at school? Is I'm learning to program. So we're using this, you keep using this word computer science. I've been a computer science undergrad major, PhD, I didn't drop out of PhD, but master's. So when you talk about, are we teaching in elementary school computation programming techniques, or are we teaching computer science? I mean, why is this like loosely used word, computer science? Like, if you look at math, you're teaching algebra, you're teaching geometry, you're teaching like calculus, you're teaching, differential calculus, or you're teaching, So I think because I taught for 6 months in schools here. I went in there and said, teachers sit down, I'll teach. So what I observed was we're teaching them programming techniques, or kind of using their ideas and applying computation to bring their ideas to life, right? So we're teaching them basic computation. Like, for example, a question is like, if you give a kid a 13, is it a prime number? They might be able to detect it. 27, they might say, what if I give you a 5-digit number? Then computation plays a role, right? So if you connect the dots into math, into computation, so essentially we're using programming as a tool to teach them how to transport their ideas into. But I keep hearing this word called, we're teaching CS. I'm a little confused about that CS part of the elementary school education. What exactly are we focusing there? Are we focusing on deep database things? Are we focusing on like neural networks? Are you focusing? What are we like? Do you mind sharing some thoughts on that?
So as I said earlier, I'm focusing primarily on computational thinking with our pre-service teachers. So how do algorithms, abstraction, problem decomposition, debugging, how do they play a role in our daily lives, in their daily lives, and how can they bring that to their classroom? Coding right now is only 1 week over a 14-week course where they just do an hour of code activity. So that's the approach that I've taken, because I think as soon as, so most of our pre-service teachers are digital natives, right? Because they're used to using technology, but they're not digitally literate, right? They don't know what happens to information when they put something, right? On like, I can search their Twitter account and they delete it, but somebody's taking a screenshot of it. So talking about digital literacy is also part of that. But again, that's only 1 week, but focusing more on the unplugged side of things and how thinking computationally can be brought to their future classrooms when they work with kids.
Yeah, this is a question we get asked at CSJ a lot, and I think that that the answer to that question is not an easy one. I mean, computer science. To me, computer science in K-12 is not the same thing as computer science in higher education. It does have a very broader, more general meaning within K-12. Now, sometimes within K-12, frankly, it often will vary based on school or district or state or teacher. It may, for many, it often is equated with coding, and that's all they think of. In other places, it's just robotics. In other places, it's just computational thinking. I think it ends up being synonymous with many different terms. And then others view it as very exclusionary. So we have groups who now want to push for state standards for say information systems or information science because they think CS doesn't include them. But in the K-12 context, it does in many cases. And so that's a difficult question to be able to answer because I don't think we actually have a clear answer on what is computer science yet, particularly for K-12. We use that phrase, and it may not actually serve us well in some sense.
Students don't know. They only know about coding.
Well, and even students don't, parents don't. Many people equate using Office applications as computer science.
The principals, I think the latest Google report did that, right? Like where they looked at all the different states and found that principals and district administrators often just say computational literacy and
And that has important implications too, how computer science is represented, because then who gets to participate or who thinks they can participate. If it's represented as programming, you're already turning off half the population who might not think they're interested in programming.
Not necessarily taking on marks. You can say if you're an English teacher, you can do project-based learning, use computation in there, and then really tune them in a different way. But still, you're giving them programming as a tool to bring their ideas to life. At that level, I mean, this abstraction and algorithms is kind of a lot of times it goes over teachers' heads when you go down that vocabulary.
Yeah, but that's why I say connecting it to what they already do in the classroom becomes important.
Yeah, I would just underscore the fact that we have to be really careful about how we use language, right? Like that's probably the most important part in all of this. And if we're going to be really, really great at this, we have to be extremely effective communicators, which means that we have to get really clear and specific on how we're using these terms. How to do that in such a large community is tough, but I mean, the English language has come a long way, right? So we'll figure it out.
Great. So I think we have 1 minute left. So does anybody have a last word you'd like to throw in on the topic? No?
When I say go green, you say go white.
Is it? We're all from Big Ten country, right?
Yeah, we're all from Big Ten country, right?
So I'm from Nebraska originally. Yeah, Summit Corners.
I did my PhD at Purdue and now I'm teaching at IU.
Yeah, so all right, there's a lot of Big Ten flavor here.
Flyover country, as the world calls it.
So I did promise Leanne I would make one plug that of course there is a CS for All consortia, and as part of that, schools of education are within that, as are many districts and so forth. And so there is that consortial opportunity there to share ideas, share information, and certainly as we talk about pre-service education, it falls within that spectrum as well. So please join me in thanking our panelists today, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.